So this whole new jeans situation is tiring and just killed my whole vibe. I want to start this video by making it clear, this isn't an in-depth recap or analysis of the whole new jeans versus Hybe situation. If you clicked on this video looking for a detailed breakdown or a full explanation, this isn't that. This is just me talking, sharing my thoughts, and getting things off my chest. I don't have many K-pop friends in real life to discuss this with, so I figured I'd just put my opinion out there and hear what y'all think in the comments. That said, let's keep it cute. No need to get too rowdy. Everything I'm about to talk about is based on my understanding of the situation. I might get some things wrong or miss certain details since I haven't been completely up to date with everything. Honestly, I'm an adult with a job and a life, and keeping up with this mess would either piss me off or just make me sad. So for the most part, I tried to tune it out and pretend it wasn't happening, because watching the downfall of a group with so much potential is just depressing. But this whole thing is massive, and it's impossible to avoid. With so many people discussing it, I've seen my fair share of videos, TikToks, and posts about it. So while my understanding of the situation may not be as crystal clear as some, I've still got plenty to say. NewJeans, a South Korean girl group formed under Adore, a subsidiary of Hybe Corporation, debuted in July 2022 with members Hani, Minji, Harin, Danielle, and Hyun. They quickly rose to prominence. The group's success was closely tied to Adore's CEO, Min Hee-jin, who played a pivotal role in their development and creative direction. However, tensions emerged between Min Hee-jin and Hybe's leadership. In April 2024, Hybe initiated an audit into Adore's management, suspecting Min of attempting to take control of the label and leaking sensitive information. Min countered these claims, accusing Hybe of exploiting Adore and allowing the plagiarism of NewJeans' concept by another Hybe-affiliated group, ILLIT. By August 2024, Min Hee-jin stepped down as Adore's CEO. In response, NewJeans publicly demanded her reinstatement, emphasizing her integral role in their identity and success. Despite their efforts, deadlines passed without resolution, leading the group to announce the termination of their contracts with Adore in November 2024, citing mistreatment. They also attempted to rebrand themselves as NJZ. The legal battle intensified when the Seoul Central District Court issued a preliminary injunction preventing NewJeans from engaging in independent activities without Adore's approval. The court upheld the exclusivity of their contracts, ruling that the group failed to demonstrate significant negligence by the label. As a result, in March 2025, NewJeans announced a hiatus, stating that the decision was made for their protection and to facilitate a future comeback. When NewJeans first debuted, it felt completely out of the blue. Like most people, I discovered them when clips of their debut song, Attention, went viral on TikTok. I checked them out and was instantly intrigued. I had no plans to stan the group. Every member was younger than me, and I've never been interested in following younger idols. In real life, I can't even befriend people younger than me, so why would I do it in K-pop? But their music and concept were so refreshing that I couldn't help but get into them. I was never a full-on stan. Stan culture isn't something I engage in anymore, but that's a conversation for another day. Still, I was a fan of their music and genuinely wanted to see these girls take over the world. But as this whole situation started unfolding, I had to take a serious step back and look at the group like, what in the full fuck are y'all getting yourselves into? Now, like I said before, I might not have all the information I need about what was going on, but from what I saw, it was a complete load of bullshit. The press conference Min Hee-jin held was a complete disaster, and honestly, it exposed just how shady her business practices are. Let's be clear. Hybe is a massive corporation that, like every other major company, makes cutthroat business moves to stay on top. But Min wasn't some innocent victim fighting against the big bad company. Her whole meltdown was because she didn't get her way. She wanted full control of Adore without Hybe having a say. That's like working at Apple, trying to steal an entire department, and then throwing a fit when Tim Cook says no. It just doesn't work like that. And the way she tried to make herself look like the savior of K-pop while throwing other groups under the bus? Insane. One of the worst things Min Hee-jin did was start unnecessary drama with Islet. These are rookies who had nothing to do with her fight against Hybe, yet she dragged them into it just to score points with the public. It's honestly disgusting how she put a target on their backs, knowing full well how brutal K-pop fans can be. The way she pushed the whole Illit copied NewJeans narrative was so calculated. It wasn't just about artistic integrity, it was about turning public opinion against them. And it worked. Illit has been getting endless hate. And for what? For existing? It's one thing for fans to argue about similarities, but when a high-level executive is the one fueling the fire, that's straight up irresponsible. She basically turned Islet into collateral damage in her war with Hybe, and now these girls, who trained for years just like any other idols, are being harassed over something they had no control over. And what makes it even more frustrating is that Min Hee-jin knows exactly how this industry works. She knows that companies take inspiration from successful groups and concepts. That's been happening for decades. Hell, NewJeans wasn't created in a vacuum either. They had their own influences. But by singling out Elite, she's made it impossible for them to succeed without constant scrutiny. And Min Hee-jin exposing texts of Hybe talking about dethroning aespa and IVE wasn't some shocking revelation. It was just common sense. Every company in every industry strategizes about how to beat their competition. If you think that entertainment executives aren't sitting in boardrooms discussing how to make their artists the most successful in the industry and comparing them to other groups, then you're delusional. That's literally their job. But including those texts in her press conference was insane because now she's just setting a fire and walking away, leaving other groups to deal with the fallout. Like sharing publicly that Hybe wanted that LE Seraphim and NewJeans were supposed to challenge aespa and IVE just makes things awkward as hell for the girls themselves. How are these idols supposed to be friends, or even interact normally, knowing that their companies are actively plotting each other's downfall? She gained nothing from revealing that. It didn't make her look good, it didn't help NewJeans, it just created unnecessary tension between groups that had nothing to do with her drama. And to be clear, this isn't me defending Hybe. I have plenty of issues with them, and I'll get to that later. But let's be real. All corporations, not just in K-pop, are corrupt in some way. There is no ethical CEO in a billion-dollar industry. And speaking of petty moves, her being mad about Hybe debuting Lee Seraphim before NewJeans was honestly childish. Sure, on a personal level, it would suck if Bang Si-hyuk told her NewJeans would debut first and then changed his mind. But on a professional level, you take that on the chin and keep it moving. This is a business. Unless there was a signed contract guaranteeing NewJeans would debut before LE Seraphim, then she had no real reason to complain. If it was just a verbal or texted promise, then she should have known better than to take that as law. Companies shift their plans all the time for strategic reasons, and she should understand that better than anyone. Making that one of her official grievances in the press conference just made her look petty and unprofessional, like act your age. And using NewJeans as her shield, that was just gross. A CEO can be close with their artists, sure, but bringing up how they were crying and begging her to stay wasn't about protecting them. It was emotional manipulation. It was her way of saying, look at them, they're sad, that means I'm right, right? That whole move wasn't about NewJeans, it was about making herself look like the ultimate martyr. And if the press conference wasn't already a circus, Min Hee-jin straight up turned it into a merch drop. Imagine holding a whole event to cry about how unfairly you've been treated, only to flip it and post fan art of yourself, being happy to see the NewJeans girls wearing your merch, and acting like she was some kind of underground resistance leader instead of, a corporate executive who got caught trying to take over a company that wasn't hers. The fact that she capitalized on all the drama and turned it into a branding moment is so gross. She wasn't fighting for NewJeans, she was fighting for herself and then slapping a price tag on it. And the worst part, she basically started acting like she was a member of NewJeans, making herself the face of their struggle. A CEO, no matter how involved, is not an idol. This wasn't about protecting the girls, it was about making herself the star of the show, and it honestly made a complete mockery of the whole situation. Like that whole thing left a sour taste in my mouth. I hate how she played the victim while throwing everyone under the bus. I've met people like this in real life. The second they don't get their way, they turn into chaos agents, shifting blame and trying to make themselves look like the only ones suffering. Like, what was the point of her press conference, huh? To get a door? To start shit? To win public favor? She just wanted to bite the bullet and get ahead of the narrative and rally people on her side. And the fact that it kinda worked at first was so bizarre to me. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to how NewJeans handled this entire situation. From their live streams to their demands, their approach was not only unrealistic, but at times outright messy. Now, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, because they're young, and it's understandable that they're emotional about everything happening. But at the same time, being young doesn't mean you get a free pass to act recklessly, especially in an industry as cutthroat as K-pop. There's a certain level of professionalism that should be maintained, and unfortunately, they completely threw that out the window. Let's go brick by brick. First, their live streams. Why was that the move? If they truly had concerns, there were better ways to handle them rather than going live and airing everything out to the public. It gave fans room to run wild with narratives and fueled unnecessary drama. Their concerns could very well be valid, and I'm not here to invalidate their feelings. But how you handle a situation matters just as much as the situation itself. Instead of going on live and practically rallying fans, they should have taken a more mature approach. Gather evidence, meet with legal professionals, and then make calculated moves. If Min Hee-jin truly cared as much as she claims, why didn't she get them a lawyer to navigate this properly instead of feeding them talking points? Then there are their demands, which, frankly, felt entitled and unrealistic. This is where knowing your place comes in. At the end of the day, they are idols under a company, not shareholders or executives. Their opinions on their CEO leaving are understandable, but they don't have the power to dictate corporate decisions. If every idol who was upset over a management change threw a public fit, the industry would be in shambles. Not to mention, the way they went about it made a mess for their fans to deal with, which is a huge issue. They encouraged fans to get involved in ways that just added fuel to the fire instead of diffusing it. And let's also talk Ilyit. The whole situation was how Hani shared a story about overhearing a manager telling another group, Ilyit, not to greet them. This led to a wave of hate against Ilyit, especially from NewJeans fans, who were already upset about the group's debut concept being similar to NewJeans. On top of that, Min Hee-jin's press conference had already put Ilyit in a difficult position, so Hani's comment just added fuel to an already raging fire. And yes, after everything, Hani did clarify that Ilyit actually did greet them and stated that she didn't want this to affect them, but by that point, the damage was already done. Ilyit had already received an overwhelming amount of hate, and you know what NewJeans did during all of that? Absolutely nothing. They had no problem speaking out about every other issue, but when it came time to defend another group who was being dragged because of something they said, they were silent. NewJeans could have easily cleared things up much sooner, but instead, they let Ilyit take the fall for something they had no control over. And what makes this even more hypocritical is that, if I remember correctly, NewJeans had expressed wanting to give a voice to K-pop idols, to stand up against mistreatment in the industry, but in this case, they did the exact opposite. Even though I don't think it was intentional, they took Ilyit's voices away and painted some contrived narrative that took off with no one stopping to set the record straight until it was too late. NewJeans claimed to want change and fairness, but their careless statements directly contributed to another group being mistreated. And they didn't clarify things until much later, only after a surveillance video and texts showed what really happened. At that point, it just felt like damage control, and it really exposed how hypocritical the whole situation was. This is where the whole, there's no such thing as a perfect victim mindset comes into play. Just because NewJeans might have valid concerns doesn't mean they haven't done things wrong in the process. And again, I'm not trying to go too hard on them because 2 out of 5 of them are still minors, and they've been relatively quiet. But my main grievances are with the older members, Hani, Danielle, and Minji, who are adults and have been the most vocal. It really feels like they're the ones pushing these narratives the hardest, and with that comes a level of accountability. At the end of the day, I'm all for change when it's necessary, but there needs to be a realistic and well-thought-out course of action. If NewJeans had genuine legal concerns, A lawsuit should have been the first move. Handle things behind the scenes, collect evidence, meet with a lawyer, and then take action. Instead, they hopped on live streams, made bold and public demands, and created more chaos than anything productive. There's a way to speak up without turning everything into a spectacle, and unfortunately, they completely missed the mark. I was going to do a whole section on Hani and Danielle linking up with that tally-talkie girl, NewJeans' parents, and Min Hee-jin's constant lying, plus those leaked texts where she was talking crazy about the girls in the past. But honestly, this video is already going to be long as hell. Just know my official stance is, boo, tomato, tomato. Alright, let's talk about how NewJeans completely fumbled in court. They spent weeks going on live streams, making bold demands, and talking about how mistreated they were. But when it actually mattered, in front of a judge, they barely had anything solid to present. Court isn't TikTok. You can't just vent your feelings and expect to win. They were more vocal on Instagram than in the one place where their words actually counted. Like, Hani had more to say in her Instagram stories than in a legal setting where evidence and arguments actually matter. And then they had the nerve to hop online after the hearing, saying stuff like, "We didn't want to make things harder. Girl, don't tell us, tell the judge. You're fighting for your freedom, not spilling tea at a sleepover." I'm not saying they shouldn't have taken legal action, and I'm not saying their concerns aren't valid, but it felt like they weren't treating this with the seriousness it deserved. Meanwhile, Hybe and Adore pulled out emails, reports, and actual documentation, while NewJeans had vibes and emotions. And now, instead of getting what they wanted, they lost the case and have to go back to Hybe/Adore, which is exactly what they were trying to avoid. The worst part? Their actions backfired so hard that they made it easier for Hybe to control them even more. Instead of focusing on winning, they focused on venting, and that's why they lost. If they truly had a case, the first step should have been gathering solid evidence, consulting lawyers, and making moves legally, not through Instagram stories and viral moments. Yes, Hybe is a mess, and yes, those leaked documents were messy as fuck. But let's not pretend they're the only company with skeletons in their closet. Every big entertainment company has dirt. Hybe just happened to get exposed. You really think SM, JYP, or YG don't have similar documents sitting in some office right now? The only difference is that Hybe's got out. But this is the problem with all K-pop companies, and this is why there shouldn't be company stans. Every company is shit in their own way. They all put their artists through hell. And speaking of artists going through hell, what NewJeans went through with Hybe Adore isn't new. When Danielle talked about the insane training conditions the girls had to go through, like having to leave notes just to use the bathroom, even in her free time. But let's not act like that's exclusive to Hybe or Adore. K-pop trainees have been dealing with this kind of control for decades. Every major group has horror stories from their training days, yet now suddenly it's shocking because it's happening to NewJeans? And where were Min Hee-jin and their parents during all this? They've got so much to say now, but when Danielle was being micromanaged to that extent, nobody had a problem? Make it make sense. And before anyone tries it, this isn't to downplay what NewJeans went through. It's to say that this issue is bigger than Hybe, bigger than Adore. People are so stuck on screw Hybe, they did our girls dirty, when the real conversation should be screw K-pop and the way music companies treat their idols. This isn't about one company, it's about an entire system that needs to change. Now, do I think NewJeans was wrong for speaking up? No. But the way they handled it, completely immature. Instead of taking this to court properly, filing a lawsuit, and fighting with actual legal weight, they ran to Instagram and live streams first, then flopped when it actually mattered. They let their fans hype them up. They listened to Min Hee-jin, and instead of becoming the industry changers their fans think they are, they just made things worse. Because now, companies will use them as an example. NewJeans lost their case, they're still stuck under Adore, and now they're on hiatus. The worst part? Future idols who want to speak up will think twice because of this. NewJeans had a chance to actually change K-pop, to be the revolution their fans make them out to be, and they failed. Not because they spoke up, but because they did it wrong. At the end of the day, I don't think NewJeans are bullies or idiots the way some people make them out to be. But they were way in over their heads, and they were failed. Failed by Hybe, Adore, Min Heejin, and their own parents. They made a lot of wrong moves throughout this whole thing, but at the core of it, they were acting on emotion and blindly following someone they put their full trust in. Someone who didn't deserve it, Min Heejin. These girls weren't prepared for what was coming, and they had a completely unrealistic idea of how this was all going to play out. I do want to see more K-pop idols speak up when things aren't right, but not the way NewJeans did. There needs to be strategy, a real plan, and way less room for error. That being said, I still wish the girls the best. I hope they get what they want, find a way to leave Hybe, and eventually get back to making music and blessing our ears.